We have a number of distinguished panelists who've joined us today, and I thank them in advance. So Romas Galeziunas, is that right? Galeziunas, okay, that's better, thank you. Is here from Gilead, and Robert Jordan. So Romas is a director of clinical virology. Robert is a director of biology, and you guys can explain what all these titles mean. I think that's part of the mystery to us. We don't exactly understand it all. Laura Ray is here from PLOS Pathogens. She's a publications manager there. And then we have Sanjay Chandriani. He's an investigator 2 at Novartis. So we have a variety of companies represented and career paths. And I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say too, because I've been in academia my whole life. I don't really know what's going on the other side of the world. And as I said, I think that as we train, we don't have much opportunity to interact. So I think I have a few stock questions that I'm going to ask the panelists. But are there any questions that people have in the field to get us going, or you want me to start asking questions? Okay, we have a bashful crowd. Okay, so I'm going to start. And this is sort of, as a mentor of postdocs, how does one get a job in industry? So I know how it works in academia. You go give your job talk and all that. So who wants to take that on first? I'm thinking maybe laboratory. Okay, Romas.
So you submit your CV to the company.
Okay.
That's the first step. That's very important, seriously. So the best way to do this is to be familiar with the company's interests, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, Gilead, you all know that we work on HIV, many other viruses that Rob will speak about as well. But we work on HIV, and if you're not familiar with what we're doing, you will be this afternoon when I speak. We're very interested in HIV eradication. So anybody who works in these areas, for example, latency assays, viral latency assays, if you're working on topics that are pertinent to understanding viral reservoirs and ways to basically activate these reservoirs in your academic lab, you become a prime candidate for a job at Gilead because, as you can imagine, we're recruiting in these areas. We always have an opening. There's always something that we need to be doing. So bottom line is you need to have good alignment. If your academic career is aligned with the interests of a company's key program or programs, you submit your CV, I guarantee it'll be reviewed, especially if there's an opening, because in industry, we want people yesterday, right? So we don't wait for a year, we don't look at positions out a year, we want them filled yesterday. So basically, if you're ready to go and your research career is well aligned with the objective of a company, you submit your CV, you will get your CV reviewed, and you come for an interview. So
that sounds pretty straightforward.
It is if you're a good scientist.
I think Romas it's what he said is true. There's also other paths. You can also explore. In my path to Gilead, went through a number of small companies where I gained experience in drug discovery and development, and actually worked on a number of different viral systems. And so those experiences were valuable at the time when Gilead was looking for somebody to work on respiratory viruses in a discovery capacity. And so, keep that in mind too. You may not get the job at a larger pharmaceutical company, but if you look for jobs that are opportunities, that might not be your final destination, but it'd be an opportunity for you to gain a certain set of experience that would that you can leverage for other positions as you move forward in your career.
So Laura, you do something different. So can you tell us a little bit about how the publishing industry is different from the typical lab scientist at the bench, and what you guys are looking for that's different?
Excellent, and excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold, so if my voice gets raspy as the day goes on, we'll just have to deal with that. But
somebody should do something about this.
So publishing is a little different. We do take people that don't have PhDs, and we do take people that have extensive postdoc experience. And there's a number of things you can do in publishing. You can work anywhere from being an academic editor that is involved in the nitty-gritty details of the peer review of a paper, or you can do what I do, which is manage and make strategic directions about where a journal is going. And so I think my advice to people that are coming from academia that have a PhD and postdoc experience is just really ask yourself what interests you, and what particular missions you would like to get involved with. Because on PLOS, for example, we're looking for people that specifically are interested in advocacy, open access, really want to kind of shake up the publishing industry as it is. We're not looking for people that want to work for a traditional publisher. And we're looking for people that are really engaged in science as a whole and are comfortable with reviewing papers that are outside of their comfort zone. Like, for example, before PLOS Pathogens, I used to work at PLOS Medicine, and we have editors there that are X-ray crystallographers. They aren't doctors, they don't have experience doing any clinical trials, but they are really good at reading papers and getting down to the essence and learning what they need to know to understand the content of that paper, then also to ask the right people in the field for advice. And so really, to be successful in publishing, you have to be good at networking and understanding the ecosystem of academia, which I think if you are participating in journal clubs and going to talks and meeting fellow scientists, these are all skills that will help you in publishing.
Okay, and I think just hearing you talk, I think next year maybe we'll have another parallel session on how do you get into the journals and what are they looking for? Because I think that's that's not quite as much a black box for the academician, but it's definitely a learned skill. So that's great, thank you. And do you have anything to add to that? Like, we've heard that Roma says just be the best and have a couple of Nature papers on entry, and there you are, you're right into Gilead if you're perfectly aligned. Robert let us know that maybe if you're not perfectly aligned to one of these big companies, you can start out with a smaller one. Sanjay, you went straight to Genentech and then over to Novartis, so you kind of did the main route. So what are your thoughts on?
I think I'd say that I'm more junior than the senior folks at this table, so perhaps I'm closer to some of the people in this room in the same boat. And I found it actually pretty challenging to actually get the first job, in part because what we do in our academic world is not exactly the same as what's happening in industry. And so I totally agree with the idea that you're trying to align what your skill set is with what the companies are looking for, but sometimes that's just very hard to do because maybe you haven't done lots of high throughput screenings or you haven't worked in matrix organizations. And so it's how does this actually happen? How do you align your skill set or your experience with what the companies are looking for? And so it can feel like a very daunting task. But I think what I would say is rest assured, every single person that's in industry was once in academia, and it has been done many times. And you just want to get as close to aligning your experience with what the need is. And sometimes it involves a lot of networking and knowing the right person. And my first job, actually, I just found a job at Genentech that looked appropriate for me. And I applied to many other positions, but in the end, I didn't know anyone there, and I ultimately landed that position. And I think getting that first position is often the hardest because it's kind of different. But then once you're in there, I think your network starts growing, you start developing the skill sets that are commonly used in industry, and your subsequent positions will likely come more easily.
Okay, Evan.
How much is having experience in industry, say prior to going to graduate school, before you're specializing where you are in now, how much should you focus on your resume? Like, is that something that is very important?
The question was about the resume. How much?
Well, not necessarily about the resume, but your experience. Like, it's certainly not related to what you've done previous or what you're doing now, but it's in that industry setting. So how can you take advantage of having that?
So you mean you may have done some industry work in the past and gone into academia, and how do you leverage your prior industry to make it look
Being that it's not necessarily
good?
related to what you're doing now.
Well, obviously what we look at is the collection of your experiences. If you had industry experience, that certainly is a plus. Tells us that you've been in a company, that you know the culture of a company, which is very distinct from that of the academic world. So that tells us that, we don't have to demystify that for you necessarily, so that's a plus. If it's not connected directly in terms of technical experience, that's not a big deal, since that's in your past, but it's a plus. It's definitely viewed as a plus. Again, back to what I was saying earlier, you have to have alignment, and that's how you get that first job. Generally technical, or therapeutic area expertise. That's a very good one, generally. If somebody has expertise, for example, in models of hepatitis B virus, which is a very hot topic right now in industry. A lot of the programs are shifting from hepatitis C virus to hepatitis B virus, because we've done quite well with the HCV. Now we're focusing on HBV. So anybody who has expertise in those therapeutic areas will obviously be of high interest to a company. And I'm just talking about virology here. There's obviously many other fields that we work in. But again, that alignment of technical or therapeutic area is the primo thing. That's what you want, and that's going to get you that first job. So for example, if you're working on plant genetics, it's going to be more difficult for you to come to a company like Gilead, which is a virology company. That's a little bit more distant, so that's a bit more of a challenge. So that's why I say the alignment is so key, technical or therapeutic area.
I want to add a little bit to that, because I agree that the ideal candidates would have this, obvious alignment, and the industry experience truly, if you don't have to demystify that process, that can be a little daunting for people coming from academia into industry. But we also look for people who have been successful in their scientific careers. I think even if it's not within the specific therapeutic area that we're looking at, if they've been successful in their graduate careers and published papers in top journals and then moved on to do a postdoc, were successful there, and any other experiences where they've demonstrated scientific success, that's something that we really look for. This is a person who's going to come in, we're able to give them a problem, and they're going to be able to solve it. And this is evidence that they were able to do that. So that's an important skill set that crosses, multiple disciplines, and it could be plant viruses or, other viral systems that we're not directly related in. But if there's a clear demonstration of scientific success, consistent scientific success, that's something that stands out on your CV for sure for us.
And just to quickly add to that, so the common theme here is scientific excellence, which is common to academia and industry. That is at the base. Rob is absolutely right. Scientific excellence will definitely get you noticed.
And I want to add a little bit to that. Also, in the publishing industry, we look for very successful scientists as well. We're looking for exceptional people that are prolific and have published, but specifically at PLOS, we don't necessarily look for people that have published in top journals with high impact factors. We're looking for people that have that are successful scientists that have a breadth of experience. But if you don't have that Nature Science Cell paper, we're less interested in that. We're more interested in seeing people that are engaged and productive and have had a broad amount of experience. Like, for example, for me, I've done research at Amgen, so I have industry experience, and I've also done research in academic labs, and that's incredibly helpful because if you're an editor and you're looking at a paper that's not necessarily in your field, you have a really broad expertise to draw upon, and you're comfortable working in this this zone of uncomfortability. And so I guess the message for publishing is just we're looking for people that are successful but also are comfortable and have a broad background to draw upon.
Mm-hmm. I think I would just extend this idea about scientific excellence. I think having evidence of good productivity in your graduate and postdoctoral work will get your foot in the door, but then when you're actually at the interview, there's a lot of people that look good on paper, but they're really vetted during that interview stage, which involves, an hour-long seminar and then meeting people throughout the day, and people will really be able to see how well you think about problems, and may not necessarily be problems that you'll be working on at the company if you're hired, but just how you think about things that you've done, what you might do, and so again, underscoring this scientific excellence in industry is as important in academia.
Yes, I have there's a microphone there.
Hi, my question is about industry postdocs. So first of all, how common are industry postdocs, and when should you consider an industry postdoc over an academic postdoc?
Good question. Sure. Thank you.
It depends on the company. Some companies have more extensive programs, others less, but they absolutely exist. At our company, we definitely have such a program. We look at postdocs occasionally. It's not a main source of employment for us. We prefer to hire people who have postdoctoral experience and come in as entry-level scientists, but we do have them. And again, it's the same criteria. I'll repeat myself again. Scientific excellence, if you have an expertise that is aligned with the project that we're hiring for, it's a fit, you definitely would be considered. But yes, they exist, and you can certainly apply. I mean, we do advertise them, and when we have one, and so you apply it, standard process, put your CV together and send it in.
I think the experience has to be right too. You know, having a postdoc in industry doesn't get your automatically get your foot in the door at the industry. So I think you just have to look at it as, is this going to be an experience where I'm going to be able to demonstrate scientific excellence by publishing in top-tier journals? You know, will I be able? Is it right for yourself? Like any other postdoc experience, it's a temporary position. I wouldn't look at it as a back doorway into the company, and that may be different for other companies. I know Genentech has an extensive postdoctoral fellowship program, and that's a very good program, and people have good experiences with that. So.
Yeah, I think I would just extend that by saying that industry postdocs can be really incredible opportunities to bring the resources that industry has to problems. And when I say resources, I don't just mean money. I mean the money to do very expensive and really often undoable experiments in academic funding environment. And I think that if there is an official postdoc program, people are recruited to these programs to do projects that are publishable. So it really represents a really great opportunity to publish, to do great science, and to be exposed to industry. So I think that if you're, again, there's a common theme here about aligning your interests and your experience with what's needed from the industry side. But if these things align, it's really, I would say, an excellent opportunity to spend a few years doing great science.
Okay, we have one in the back.
Perhaps it's good that I'm not looking for a job. I think all of you have said that if you're a really awesome scientist, you'll get a really awesome job. I think most people probably knew that before the panel started. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I'll even reframe that question. Say that I'm one of these much maligned plant biologists or virologists, and I want to get a job at a company where I don't have a perfect match. And I've heard networking said a few times. I mean, I have a vision of hundreds of CVs coming in, and you pick the ones that match the best. Okay, so here's your top 10 you interview. But what if you're good, but you're not perfectly matched? And how do you break down that barrier and meet the people in there? Because certainly if you know someone, it helps, I would assume. Is that right? So where do we find you guys, and how do we interact besides right here, right now?
Well, I mean, scientific meetings. You know, we all attend meetings, and we all at some point publish the work that we're doing. So it's always a good opportunity to network with your colleagues, and if you're fortunate enough to, if you could establish collaborations with some of the industry partners, that's always a good way to, to build those relationships. You want to add to that?
Networking is important, but it is not a substitute for scientific excellence and alignment. It's not. We do this. I mean, we do this all the time. People come up, they shake your hand, and they say, I'm really terrific. You send a CV, and, there are no publications, for example. Well, there's not much we can do for you. I mean, again, it gets back to scientific excellence. If you're outstanding, we will notice you. If you're outstanding, and you're working in a great lab, I'm sure your PI will probably know someone or somehow will get to an industry person, and they'll say, I have an excellent person here. Look at the CV, and we will look at it, and we'll probably agree and say, wow, this is an outstanding person. Let's now bring them in and talk to them. So networking is important. You need to be seen, but it's not a substitute for not having a great CV. You have to have that great CV, and it has to be well aligned. It's the same message, and it's an important message. I hate to disappoint you, but there's no way around that. That's essential. And then,
okay, we have one over here.
Related to the alignment issue, in looking at sort of job descriptions of late, and particularly in the larger companies, it seems like there's an expectation that scientists are able to do, sort of everything ranging from protein biochemistry all the way through an animal model. Is that pretty much necessary at this point, or is that not actually the case?
You can take that now.
Yeah, we like well-rounded people that can do everything, but we realize you can't. When we put those job descriptions out there, we hope to hit, 70, 75%. If you got 70, 75%, by all means, submit your CV. It's actually a very important question. Do not be discouraged if you do not have the exact profile. By all means, if you are 50 to 70% of the way there, and again, you have an excellent CV, you have to submit your application. I mean, you will be reviewed. That's just to get everything that we would love to have in a candidate. We are realistic. We know we're not going to get those candidates. So is that okay?
Yes, but in particular, it's not absolutely necessary to be doing the animal models.
No,
okay.
no. What you said, protein biochemistry, animal, that's pretty darn wide. So we realize that.
And sorry. I just wanted to comment a little more. It's the same way in publishing as well. Like, we often ask for many years of experience. I know that's daunting for people early in their careers like me, but we have some excellent editors on staff at PLOS that don't even have postdoctoral experience. I can think of one in particular who comes with a PhD in animal research ethics, and she was such an excellent fit that we scooped her right up. And so I think, again, it's the theme that we keep communicating is excellence and an understanding of the culture and drive and initiative and demonstrative drive and initiative. But you don't have to, if you wait until you've hit every single point that people are asking for, you'll never get there. Just apply.
It's a good message. Keep applying too, I think. There's a mic over there. Good.
So it's sort of been my observation in our own department that it seems to be more common now that people do very long postdocs before eventually starting to apply for industry jobs. So I guess two parts of the question are, if I'm about to graduate with a PhD, is it even possible for me to compete for some of these entry-level industry jobs if the market's flooded with people with extensive postdoc experience? And then if your answer is no, you've got no chance, how can I better choose a postdoctoral position where I might be a candidate sooner rather than later and not have to spend the equivalent of another PhD before getting a job?
I don't think the length of the postdoc really factors in. It's really just the quality of the work that's been conducted. And, we see people who are fairly soon into their postdoctoral career, maybe one publication with one, manuscript in preparation, but the quality of the work, it stands out. So I don't think that's an issue. I guess, choosing the postdoc so that you're better aligned with a particular interest, that's harder for me to say. It's... I don't know if that's even possible to kind of predict that. It's just as long as you have a good scientific experience, and that's something that you can take with you, some experience that you can leverage for something else later on. I think that's how you should look at it.
I concur with Rob that those are good points. I mean, if you have done a PhD and you have 5 Nature papers, well, guess what? You're going to be looked at. I mean, if you're a superstar, there's no need for a postdoc, potentially.
So Sanjay, I want you to comment. You gave the impression that you applied for a few positions before you actually got yours. So what do you think was it that broke it through for you and you got this big Genentech job? Where did you look? How did you eventually get to that point? Because I think that's going to be the more common. We all would love to have the Nature papers, myself included. But if you don't, and maybe you do, I don't know. But so how did you actually break through? I want to hear that.
That's a good question. I probably ended up applying to somewhere between 75 and 100 positions before I got my first offer. Or maybe it was my second or third, but the first 2 weren't very interesting. So I think that in terms of starting, I think it depends on the company. For a place like Genentech, if you want to come in as a scientist position, which is like a lab head, you really have to think about it as a faculty position. So I haven't ever heard of anyone coming in straight out of grad school in that kind of role. So a postdoc is it's not. I don't think they think of it as putting you through the ringer, but it's just developing more evidence for your scientific excellence. So, but I think there are companies that will take people in more managerial roles like that out of grad school. But I think in general, because of the reason that you said, there's so many good applicants out there that you just need more evidence and more papers to really show how you might be able to produce. And in terms of how I got my first position, it was really, again, the alignment thing that we keep talking about. There were a certain set of skills that I had that were appropriate for what I wanted to do. And when I say alignment, it was really about the skills. My career has been kind of unique in that in grad school I was studying a transcription factor that causes cancer. Then I went in my postdoc and I studied a herpes virus at UCSF. Then I went to Genentech and I started studying biomarkers in immunologic diseases. Now I'm doing viral discovery at Novartis, so very, very different. But there were some common themes about how I was asking questions, which was what was recognized, and people would take chances on me for applying those skills for new problems. And so I guess I was been fairly effective in communicating how those unusual skills could be applied to the problem at hand.
Okay, next question there, please. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am a junior student in a college. I know most of us here are like grad students or like professional scholars. So as a company perspective, what's the advantage you want to hire a like undergrads rather than like grad students? And in front of me right now, there are two paths, or just go to work, or like pursue a higher master degree in the future or PhD degree. So can you give me some advice?
That's a great question. So is there a path without having a PhD in either publishing or industry? And I think there might be. So let's hear a little about that path.
Should I go first?
Please.
So there is certainly two paths. If you come in with an undergraduate degree, you can work your way up the career ladder. It takes a little longer. It doesn't replace going to graduate school, but you can still achieve those same positions, at least in research at Gilead, and I've seen that happen. But the expectation is that you'll be working in the laboratory most of the time. And as you get more skills and demonstrate productivity, you'll be given more responsibility. And at some point, you would have some management experience. And if you can handle that, then you can keep continuing up the career ladder. Coming in with a PhD and a postdoc, and hopefully with some management experience. That's the other aspect of this that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. Mentoring students, mentoring undergraduates. That's an important factor for us when we look at potential candidates. How well will they be good colleagues? How well will they be able to manage people as well? So there is a path, coming right out of school without an advanced degree to get into industry and move up.
Yes, that was my experience, actually. I graduated from Berkeley and went and worked at Amgen, and you do spend a lot of time learning new skills in the lab. I actually experienced a little bit of a glass ceiling while I was in industry, but also there's just a lot of patience involved where you can't, if you're coming without like that experience of going through the process of getting a PhD, you kind of can't fast track your experience in industry. But there's definitely room for growth and development and learning skills and mentorship. In publishing, it's a little similar. There's kind of two tracks. There's tracks for people that want to be professional editors, and so those are the people that are really invested in guiding papers through peer review. And you do need experience writing papers, being a reviewer, being even like a guest editor for a paper in order to get those positions. And so those people tend to come with PhDs or masters at least, and then a lot of experience, and they tend to be quite exceptional. But there's a lot you can do in publishing without a PhD. I actually don't have one. And you tend to do a lot more work towards making strategic decisions about the direction your journal is going to take. So like I work for PLOS Pathogens, and we're an open access journal, and so I am really invested in growing our editorial board and making connections with PIs that review for our journal, but then also I'm involved in advocacy and writing press and marketing, and so I think there's a lot of actually really interesting work that you can do, and there's ways to engage in the research ecosystem, but you're doing it kind of more at like 30,000 feet, and you're not getting really invested in like the scientific detail of every single paper that crosses your desk. I hope that answers your question.
Good, thank you. So you have a question.
Yes, hi. So I've heard industry culture mentioned on the panel, and so that actually seems to me to be pretty important because that's going to affect, I think, your ability to flourish and ultimately be happy in a current industry. And Sanjay, you mentioned matrixed organizations, which I think is probably something that most grad students don't experience in their PhDs. So my question really is, how can grad students or even undergrads kind of get exposure to industry culture and learn about whether that would really be suitable for them in a career?
And I'll add, what is the big difference between industry culture and what we're used to in our hierarchical academia?
So I'd like to just comment a little bit about the industry culture. I think as a graduate student and postdoc, I definitely had this impression that in industry, you didn't really write your own ticket in terms of what you were going to work on. And that just sounded so stifling. And that at any given week, someone might come along and say, your project is over, you're working on this. So those things to some extent are true, that other people will influence what you work on. However, that negative connotation that's associated, the way I just presented it, is completely wrong. In that, when we work on problems, we're working on really interesting problems. They don't let us work on boring stuff. And when we work on a problem, there are many people that are thinking about this. We really work as a team. And if this is unlike what it was like for me as a grad student or a postdoc, where I was primarily the person who was driving the project, working with my PI. But now when we work on problems, there's 10, 15 people that think about this problem. And people have lots of different experiences, and we get to the answer so much faster. We don't take this long, scenic route to get to the answer, either to shut down a project because it was the wrong way to go. So the way I think about this is that we're asking really interesting questions. There's a lot of people who are willing to help, and everyone's got some skin in the game. And we get to the answers faster. And even if the answer's, a no-go, that's fine, that's an answer. Mm-hmm. And so that culture that I used to think before I got into it was a bad one is actually an awesome one. And I wish some of that could get into academia to some extent. So I think that's a very different impression of the culture that now I see from the other side.
That was very well said, Sanjay. You captured that, you nailed that. That is a very, very accurate view, I think, of most companies. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. So what you heard there that's really important is teamwork. Teamwork is extraordinarily important. You have to be able to do that. That's one quality that we absolutely must have in industry. And that's the big difference. When you're trained as a postdoc, as a PhD student, you're generally running your own show, right? You have your project. You're not really interacting with 10, 15, 20 people. So that's a pretty radical departure from what you're used to, and that's a very key. So you need to know that when you're coming to industry, if you're coming to industry, that you need to be able to work with a whole lot of different people, and guess what? They're all going to have very different personalities, and they may not always be easy to work with, but you must find ways to make the team work, and the team must go forward. So that's a quality that we actually look for. It's hard to find it, obviously, in an interview, but we ask a lot of questions about, to the references that people give us, basically. How is this person, in working with others? And that's a very, very important question. That answer to us has great, great value.
I think there's also, and I agree completely with this collaborative nature of industry from my own experience, but there's also a different pace. The thing that I loved going from an academic lab at Berkeley to Amgen was I would spend forever as an organic chemist running my own columns and isolating my own compounds, and I suddenly at Amgen had the facilities and the support to just speed through all of these things. It was suddenly like falling into like a net of people that just wanted me to be successful and gave me the tools I needed to be successful. Because there is a lot of support and sharing of time through working together. And so I think in industry you also need to be comfortable with working at a faster pace, because you're not going to be coming in your day and like working on every little step of your problem. Like there's a lot of efficiencies that people have brought to the group. And it's also the same way in publishing. A lot of our editors will look at papers and you have to read this paper and contact experts and make a decision and render that decision on this paper within a few days, because if you sit and let this and really contemplate and let this paper sit for a while, someone might be missing out and get scooped potentially on their research. And so I think that's the thing that people really struggle with the most when they go into publishing, is just the quick nature of it. But you eventually grow to like love it and get a little addicted to it in time. I personally enjoy it.
Good. Next question.
I think you probably just answered the question I was going to ask. I was curious, for newly minted scientists or newly minted editors, going into that field, what are the biggest challenges that they find? What takes them by surprise? And is there really any way to prepare for that, or do you just have to go through it?
So the transition for me, I guess, so I worked in academia as an assistant professor for a few years and then went to a smaller company. I think what surprised me, first off, I was caught off guard by the pace. It's much quicker. Things move much faster. And I was surprised that people wanted to help, and growing up on the East Coast, I was always suspicious. What do you want to help for? So once I got used to the kind of the collaborative nature of projects, that was one issue. An issue, too, as the companies are bigger, Gilead's a little bit bigger. This is the biggest company I've worked at. And even there, I find that you have to really make sure that you communicate with all these different functional areas and make sure that the chemists, are aware of what you're doing or what your ideas are, and everybody's in alignment. I spend a lot of time communicating, these ideas to make sure, because the chemists will go off and they'll start talking amongst themselves, and they could be going off on a tangent. And if you're, involved in the project leadership, per se, you have to make sure that everybody's speaking the same thing or has the same information.
And maybe just one more thing to add. It's daunting when you first show up and you start talking with intellectual property lawyers, medicinal chemists, DMPK, that's drug metabolism folks, toxicologists, who else am I forgetting? I mean, we're talking way beyond your biological experience. And you have to find a way to communicate with these folks. There's not necessarily a common language, so you have to be able to be skilled at the art or skilled at translation, to basically read and understand enough about IP law, enough about business development to be able to converse with your colleagues that are completely in different areas, but you have to come together and work together. So this translation part is actually a skill that is very important to have to be able to understand what's happening at the higher level in terms of a program or a project that's going on.
And I think even communicating up and down, the senior management lives on a different information strata, and so they may not want to hear every single detail of the experiment, but they need to hear the crucial things because they're managing, hundreds of projects, and so they have to keep that in mind. So it's very different than another. I'm still trying to learn that skill.
Yeah. No, that's a great point that Rob makes. I mean, that is it's a very important skill, and it's generally driven by being brief and to the point.
Yeah.
Verbose does not work with management. You have to be brief and to the point.
It's the same way in publishing. We often herd cats because everyone that volunteers to review for us, they have day jobs, or more than one day job. And so really to be an editor, you have to be able to successfully navigate the web of academia and to build relationships that are meaningful. So often our editors have their go-to stats professor when they're looking at a certain type of epidemiological study or something like that. And so again, it's like the ability to communicate and to build camaraderie, and And then, what else was I going to say? I think the biggest challenge for me and a lot of people I've talked to also that come from science and go into publishing is that we all go into science because we love like the nature of it. We love like the hands-on aspect of like being a bench scientist, and you give that up when you go into publishing. I miss it sometimes. I'm like tied to my screen, but at the same time, it's also like incredibly liberating. Like I don't know how many weekends I've had to go in to like check on a reaction or rotate my cells, and suddenly you're freed from that. Like you close your laptop and you're done. But it's very different to exist solely in a space that is written. It's a very, I guess, intellectual endeavor. Yeah.
Thank you. So a question here, and then one behind there after that. Okay, what was your question?
Hi. Something that's always been a black box for me has been like the transition from a bench scientist to a more management position. Specifically, what kind of positions and responsibilities that go with those positions are characteristic of that move?
So I think when we hire entry-level research scientists, so this is a scientist with a PhD and a postdoc, it's our expectation that they'll become managers, right? And so, and that's what we work towards. And so we're trying to find people who are excellent scientists, but are also good with being able to manage people. And that's a skill set that's not often taught in graduate school or in school in general. And so, you know, if somebody's had experience mentoring students or working in some mentoring capacity, that's something that we look at. The transition is kind of gradual and it's natural. So you're running a small group. You know, you might have one person working with you, reporting to you, and how well you do at your research and your ability to manage one person will dictate, you know, how you move on in your career, I guess. Does that answer your question?
I guess I was looking more for. So I guess it probably is pretty obvious that it's gradual, that you slowly get more and more people. But I didn't know what kind of those responsibilities look like. Surely it's not just I tell you to do this experiment, and then you do this experiment, and then now I have two people, and I tell two people to do this experiment, I have two people to do the experiment. Like, what kind of other responsibilities do you gain? Like, as far as like going to meetings, meeting people at different conferences, like.
Do you want to try that? Yeah.
So I think Rob makes a very good point. You have to be first a good mentor. So you get one report, you have to be a great mentor. But the other skills that you want is communication and organizational skills. You have to be very well organized, and you have to demonstrate that. Those are key to be able to move up. So you have to be able to basically manage large amounts of information, distill them very effectively to something that can be communicated, for example. Again, the mentoring part in conjunction with that, and clear communication, clearly basically speaking your thoughts in a concise way. So I think those are maybe some of the key features of becoming a junior manager at least our company, I would say.
Yeah. So I think we'll take one more question and maybe one or two more. I want to wrap up in about 7 minutes so our speakers and panelists have a chance to relax, especially Romas because he has to talk next. Okay, so question in the back there.
We've talked a lot about alignment between applicants and companies, so I'm curious how each of you in your respective positions anticipate the things that you're looking for might change, if at all, within the next 5 to 10 years.
That's a terrific question. So if I understand your question, you're asking how things might change in industry so that you can basically align yourself with what may be happening. Is that what your question is?
What sorts of skills do you think might be different that you're looking for?
So, and then this gets back to the other question of this gentleman over here earlier. So I like the idea of starting to think about industry at the PhD level, because you can then choose a very appropriate postdoc. So what I would recommend is, what is your passion? What disease area is your passion? Alzheimer's, pancreatic cancer, hepatitis B virus. What is your passion? And if you have a passion for a particular area, for a particular disease, you then choose a postdoc or a second postdoc to basically start learning about that. And I mentioned those three areas because I'm pretty confident that those three areas will still be very hot topics in 5 years from now. Those are the ones that I thought of first. But that's the kind of thinking you need to have. So if you have a passion, if there's an area that you have a passion for, you just line up your career path along that. Make sure you pick up the right skills, technical and therapeutic area, skills. And then guess what? If you publish a few nice papers in that area, I'm sure you submit your CV to a number of companies, because those areas are actually being studied, and there's drug discovery and development efforts in most companies in those areas. So you're going to have a lot of choices. You're going to be able to submit your CV to a lot of places, and I bet you're going to get a lot of people interested in you if your passion is aligned with an area that is of high importance to a pharmaceutical industry company.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of great stuff. How do you get your foot in the door? What are you guys looking for? And if you're not a perfect match, how do you get there? We've heard a little about the culture. And I think I'd like to close with just a quick, brief statement from each of you. What's your favorite thing about being in industry and your least favorite thing about being in industry? And don't be afraid to say anything bad about what your job is, because we want to know, what do we look forward to and what do we not like about being in industry. So if each of you could just do that, and then we'll close the session. No. Okay, one question. What's your question?
So, how does one feel about going from an associate professor to a really hierarchical system where people want you to work at hard, fast pace, where you don't have the luxury of having a lovely bubble bath, forget about science for a day, and then you come up with the best solutions to your problem?
Okay, so this isn't a trainee doing the transition. This is someone more senior making a transition. Okay, that's a good question. I'm interested in that.
So I think, for more senior folks coming in to more senior positions, again, it has to be the right fit, right? I mean, this person, if their style of doing science doesn't mesh with the culture of the company, it's just not going to happen, right? I think, even some of our very senior therapeutic area heads, and these are very successful people in academia and in medicine, coming in. And, what are their motivations for coming, right? So they come to be a senior executive leading a therapeutic area. Suddenly they'll have all this resource and they'll be able to make a difference in public health by bringing these products to market. So there's different motivations for people who are very senior in their careers, I think, coming to industry. But if they're eccentric and they might be the smartest person in the world, but if they're eccentric and difficult to work with, they're not going to get a job, at least, not in a bigger company.
Or even at a lower level, if it's postdoctoral scientists coming in, because I understood that there's much more hierarchy in the industry, and people are always
So I guess, academia tolerates a lot of eccentricity, right? Because you're pretty much a solo player responsible for your own career and your research. And industry, you have to work with other people. So, you can be brilliant, but difficult to work with. And I think they're going to counterbalance each other. So.
Okay, so Sanjay, do you mind starting us off with your favorite and your least favorite?
Sure. And one of the things that I really like about industry is, I think I said this before, that when we do experiments, there's a lot of people thinking about the same problem. We get to answers quickly. I like that aspect of the sort of collaborative nature, but I also like Ramos was saying that we have to interact with a lot of people. IP lawyers to business development to med chem folks to all sorts of people, and through those interactions, I continue to learn. Every one of those interactions, I'm learning something new. So the collaborative nature to me has been really a positive aspect of industry. What I find perhaps the most challenging is perhaps a side effect of that collaborative aspect, that there's a lot of meetings. And to some extent, the meetings get in the way of actually doing work. So having to manage the meetings, whatever it takes to do that, I'm still trying to figure out. But that to me sometimes is a challenge to actually getting work done.
Great. Laura?
Oh gosh. I think everyone who goes into publishing, we all love the story of science. When you read that paper where it's just told so beautifully what they did and what they found, we love that and we find it really compelling. And so when I personally am able to take that and then communicate it to the broader public through a press release or by, going to a conference and telling people about it and seeing, press coverage or just like the general discourse that surrounds the work that we publish, I'm really touched and warmed because I think we all went into publishing because, again, we wanted to be advocates for research culture. And when we see our authors' work being broadly discussed, we know that we're going to help people make rational policy decisions and help to really think about science funding globally. And so I find that just incredibly validating. And then I guess when I have to speak about, this isn't necessarily something I dislike, but I think one of the drawbacks in publishing is that there's a real human story to what we do. Like every paper I look at is, like I know that is someone's paper, that's someone's, 3 years of graduate work. They've been in a lab doing all of that. And when it's delayed or when it's rejected, like I personally, it's kind of hard to like remove yourself from feeling some empathy. And it's hard to, I think, draw a line to not, I always am trying to spend a little extra time here and there to push papers along just to like help people get their work published. So that can be something
you guys
challenging.
feel bad when we're rejected too. That makes me feel a lot better. Thank you. That's great.
So I think for me, what motivates me is that we're making products that ultimately will help people's lives be better. And I think when you go through the process, it's very long. It requires a lot of interaction with people. But ultimately, when a product gets into the clinic and you see that it's working and it's helping people, that's very motivating. I think the drawback with industry, again, is the meetings. Trying to balance. You have to get work done, right? But everybody wants to talk to you, and so I find that if you schedule fake meetings, your calendar's blocked and you can get work done. My secret's out.
I just learned something. I work with Rob. I didn't know this. All right, so I'm very lucky. I work for Gilead Sciences. Gilead is a phenomenal place to work. We make a difference. We discover things that actually transform people's lives, and we find medications that really, really matter. It's fascinating to be in an environment like that. You wake up in the morning, you go to work, you know what your mission is, you know that things will happen. We will deliver things sooner or later that will impact people's lives. So it's really, really, you get fired up doing this. Now, for me personally, I've been working on HIV for 27 years. So you can imagine, participating in that company that is the world's leader in HIV antivirals is just, it's a dream for me to be working at that company. On the downside, what I find difficult, and this is an area that I work in a lot, is building consensus. So new ideas. When you have a new idea and this idea is building, it's not a straight path sometimes to get that idea to have other people realize this is a good idea, that you need to put effort into this. So you have to put a lot of work into basically building consensus, and it's not a straight path. You're going to have opposition. But when you succeed, it's a great feeling because that means that everybody heard your arguments, looked at the data, and said, yeah, this is a good idea, let's go for it. And sometimes you don't succeed, and those are the harder moments when you still believe that this is a good idea, but the company or other people did not believe so, and you have to toe the line. You have to accept the company's decision, and sometimes those are harder. But in the vast majority of cases, we have brilliant people at the company. The truth comes out, the data is viewed, and generally the right ideas, the good ideas do come to the top.
All right, I would like to thank our panelists. That was fantastic. Thank you very much.